Good morning and welcome to the first MoonLore video for 2022. We start the month and the year with a new moon on January 2nd that occurs at 12 degrees Capricorn and at 1:33 p.m. in Eastern time. So depending on where you are, you might want to adjust that time. But that is the first lunation of the year, a new moon in Capricorn. So, to start the conversation, let's just revisit the idea of what the lunation cycle is. And that is it's the relationship between the sun and the moon. Each lunation begins with the new moon. We can equate that with the plant cycle where you plant a seed, something begins. It's great to have a new moon so close to the first of the year. You think, Jennie?
Yeah, it's very much like, yep, it really is the start of the year. I think this year it will really feel like that right out of the gate. So
yeah, I think so too. Having a lunation, a new moon right there at the beginning of the year. So the idea with this relationship between the sun and the moon is that's the beginning, that's the seed planting time. And then a week later, we come to the first quarter moon, which is sort of a crisis to get things moving in the right direction. And then a week after that, we come to the full moon, which the idea is that that's the full illumination of the cycle. A week following that, we come to the last quarter square where we start to renegotiate the direction we're going in order to come to the next new moon. And that's the quick little cycle. And the full moon that is attached to this new moon happens on January 17th. So you want to put that into your calendar as well. Do you want to mention the longer cycle now, Jennie, or should we wait and do that later?
No, I might as well just pop the date in your mind so that you know it's that one's going to be June 14th. That's when we'll see the full moon in Capricorn. So that gives you that 6 month or actually year-long cycle. The full moon really is like the midpoint of the cycle. So
yeah, the full illumination. So on the small scale, we've got the full illumination happening on January 17th. And in the bigger cycle, we've got it on, what did you say, June 14th? June 14th.
Yeah.
So, think about that. What you're beginning right now is going to really, in the big picture, show up in mid-June. And it's lovely here at this time of year to think about June, the warmth of the season. So, okay, that kind of gives us a little clue of the cycle itself. And with this happening in Capricorn, I think we need to talk about Capricorn. There's a lot going on in that area and has been for a long time, really.
Yeah, it's true. Capricorn has been illuminated for a few years now, really. I mean, 2020 was certainly a huge Capricorn glut of planets. And now, right now, as well as this new moon, we also have the Venus retrograde cycle, which is happening in Capricorn. So we will be talking about the area of light of your life that this is going to fall in, because this is 4 planets falling in the Capricorn area of your life. And Capricorn's a fairly serious area of your life, and it refers to the willingness to be solo, to be a hermit, and also where to be in integrity. So it really is it kind of is a time to get serious and allow yourself to be alone, so that you can be your best self ultimately.
Right. And, one of the things I think people need to be reminded of is when we go through and talk about, if your rising sign is such and such, this new moon falls in this house. I think the thing to understand is that, with the one we're talking about right now, this area of your life is always serious. It's not just serious because the full moon is falling there, but that's the area of your life where Capricorn holds its energy in that area of your life. And like you said, that's a very serious area. That's an area where you have to do your work alone and be in integrity and be willing to take the time and the effort to develop mastery in that area. There was something you said earlier that I loved, and I just want to have everyone really keep in mind. That area of your life it's where you have to discover and follow the mature path. You can't be immature in this area. And at this period of time, with all of this going on in Capricorn right now, we all need to really look at our own, you know, yeah, our maturity level.
Yeah, yeah. The maturity level, and also there's some of the other significations bring in your values as well. So
Yeah.
it is about your own values and wrestling with your own values, being willing to look at it, being willing to stay with it and look within. Yeah.
Yeah, and the archetypes of the hermit and the strategist and what other archetypes are there to Capricorn?
The grumbler.
The grumbler.
The kind of like, oh, I have to carry this heavy burden. And so there's a little bit of that. But also the administrator. So the ability to really move things in a direction, to coordinate lots of pieces. And there's a really strong executive function. Like, I'm going to execute these set of, rules or these protocols that need to happen. So it's I always think of Capricorn as being able to move mountains, but it's going to do it one boulder at a time. That it really means the labor of picking up the stone and moving it over here and coordinating other help really to do it.
Right. Yeah. And if it's a job that has to be done alone or as the boss or administrator of others. It's not an area where you're going to hold hands with somebody else and do it together. It's an area where, you're taking on the bulk of the effort. There's a lot of ambition involved.
And I was also thinking about Capricorn's also an area of your life where you must take responsibility for yourself. And so there is like a sort of a parental responsibility. There's something about discipline in there, like having some self-discipline and maybe having to ask for discipline from other people. So it can be a fairly authoritarian type of figure as well, or vibe or energy that we all need to contend with. So
yeah, Capricorn's ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is the authoritative teacher. This is not an area of life where we're going to, play and have a good time. And we got to buckle down and get serious and take responsibility. So let's get that chart opened and take a look at it.
The other thing I do want to just add about Capricorn as I do this part is just that it's a cardinal sign. So it's starting, not only we had a new moon where we're starting something new, but whenever you see a cardinal sign, it means it's a sign to initiate new things. You are at a new point, a turning point, and that's always what a cardinal sign is going to show. So we're going to extra see that right at the beginning of 2022. Okay.
Yeah, those two are in their conjunction. They're holding hands there at 12 degrees Capricorn. If you have planets, if you know your chart and you've got planets right around, within a few degrees of 12 degrees of any cardinal sign. So that would be Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, anything around those. And this is going to be even more significant to you personally. So when we look at this, what else is in play? What else do we have to consider in thinking about how this is going to play out?
Well, I mean, the one major aspect is the trine to Uranus. Uranus in Taurus has been with us for a few years now, and it really is speaking to disruptions, changes, awakenings, some way that the status quo is being shaken up. And Taurus may refer to food systems, supply chains, environmental causes and crises. So all of those things are some of the big picture things of what we just open our eyes and we see. That's what's happening.
Right. And Capricorn, from that perspective, Capricorn is all about big business and big government. And so you put those together, and to me, this is a very, very simple statement on a personal level. When you're looking at your own chart, it's a very personal statement of wake up to where you need to really make sure you're in integrity. It's kind of as simple as that.
Yeah, and if you're able to do that because of the Uranus trine, I feel like you're not just doing it for your own self. It has an impact, has a ripple effect to everyone around you. I think those outer planets represent the bigger forces in play among other things that they represent, but that's definitely
Yeah.
one way. So that just, I kind of like to think that we all need to do these things with ourselves and be in integrity with ourselves, but also to know that it does have an impact on bigger levels. It's not, which I find helpful. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't all just your thing. This is something everybody has to do.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah. That's fascinating. Okay, so that's really the only real aspect from any other planet. There is a square from Chiron, which, since it's on this chart, we are going to mention it.
I will Laurie do Chiron. But I like Chiron. I think it's super helpful. So,
well, it is. It's important. It's not a planet. It's an asteroid. But yeah, Chiron is considered and thought of as the wounded healer. So there's something in here. There's some piece to look at. How are you seeing that, Jennie? I haven't really thought it through.
well, I was just thinking Chiron's role, if you look at the astronomy of Chiron, its role is to knit the inner planets and the outer planets, because it comes on the inside of the Mars orbit and goes out past the Saturn orbit. And so what it does is it brings your personal story into the transpersonal lens, meaning that it kind of knits the two together. So it kind of echoes that theme I just mentioned about when you're doing your work, it's actually having a ripple effect on a larger scale. And right now with Chiron in Aries, I think my perspective is that at least one of the meanings is the way out of balance principle of masculinity that's in our culture. And there's so much conversation about this right now in so many different realms of what that principle even means and what we're doing with it, and how to take action with integrity would be a way that I think that the particular lesson in this Capricorn new moon, knitting together those two things.
I like that, bringing that idea of healing, because Chiron is the wounded healer. It's not just the wound, it's the bringing that healing element, and the square itself, just the effort.
Yeah. And when I say masculinity, I think we have a lot of confusion in our culture that we're trying to sort through with even terms like that, masculinity, femininity. But what I really want to refer to at a basic level is not a masculine thing at all, but it's just the taking of action of the autonomous self, and being in integrity with that.
Interesting. Interesting. I like that. That's fascinating. I hadn't thought of it that way at all. Thank you, Jennie. All right. So now the other thing that I wanted to really think about is, because of how these planets are all gathered up here, we see that right as soon as that new moon occurs, the moon is approaching and going to be going over all this whole area of Venus, which is retrograde, Pluto, Mercury, and Saturn, just within the next few days after the new moon. So the moon is kind of bringing its energy of insistence on integrity to the conversation that is so potent between Pluto and Venus right now, with that retrograde, that stationed retrograde happened right with those two together. And that's such a powerful statement of the transformation of values, and there's something very, very intense in that. This is not a light, easy holiday season this year.
No, it's kind of like we're all, on one level, normally you're trying to be together this time of year. Many of us are still choosing to be together with family members this time of year, despite COVID and the struggles of the pandemic. But even if you are being together, there's this demand around reckoning with your own self, with, sort of internally, or just as an autonomous person in the group. So, or you're deciding not to do that and you're home alone. And that's very clearly just saying, hey, you're going to be home alone. And like, I mean, even if you don't know much about astrology, which, those of you watching this probably do know a fair amount, you just see this huge glut of planets in Capricorn, and these are serious planets.
Right.
So
These are very serious times to have that Venus retrograde right there with Pluto, and then the sun and moon coming along in that conjunction right in the middle of all the holiday stuff. Yeah, it tells a big story of how we are interacting with others and with ourselves. And yeah, all of that integrity piece. We have to make these choices on our own of how we're going to interact and how we're going to pay attention to what's going on in the culture or not. It's very much, there's a level of it that it's up to us to make these decisions. And yet the decisions we make are so tied in. And like you were saying, what we do matters.
Yeah. And prior to starting to make this video, Laurie, you were talking about too, like this chart also very much makes a statement about being careful what you say, because there's a tight relationship as the moon goes over Venus, Pluto, Mercury. There's a very tight relationship here between those three things, Mercury, Pluto, and Venus, which really brings in a question of like, what are your values? And then how are you going to speak about it? And recognizing that your words contain quite a bit of power in this case. And so just being very mindful. I wouldn't necessarily say cautious, but just mindful, paying attention to what you're saying, and just recognizing that your words may have a bit more weight than maybe you're used to them having.
Definitely. It's interesting because on this day, January 2nd, like, I don't know, 12 hours before the exact new moon was when Mercury moved into Aquarius. It had been right there with that Pluto. And actually, you pointed out that Pluto is exactly at the midpoint between Venus and Mercury, which really brings in that, pay attention to the power of your words, the power of your values and how you speak from that place. There's a lot in here.
Yeah.
There's a lot in here.
The other thing that really is cool about this chart since our last lunation is that Jupiter has moved into Pisces. It moved into Pisces, what do we say, December 28th? So
December 28th, yep.
5 days before this chart. So that's really nice. Like there's a Jupiter is one of the rulers of Pisces, and so it's pretty happy in this sign. There's a really nice kind of like of Jupiter going into Pisces.
And I want to bring back, in regards to that, Jupiter moving into Pisces. Jupiter was in 2020, Jupiter made contact with Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. And that was really, the beginning of the pandemic, all the stuff that happened through 2020. And then Jupiter moved into Pisces mid-May last year, 2021, mid-May to late July, Jupiter was in Pisces. And if you can think about in your own life, what was the expansive sense at that time that then kind of at the end of July kind of tucked back in? And now I think things are going to open up and get a little easier as we go into this. We've got some serious work to do, but I think Jupiter moving into Pisces is really gives me some hope for things getting a little easier in these upcoming months. Yeah, I'm holding on to that.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's nice for Jupiter to sort of be liberated from Aquarius, because Aquarius is one of Saturn's signs, and Saturn has been in Aquarius for much of the time that Jupiter has. So Jupiter is like, okay, I can finally like break free and kind of do my own thing here a little bit and do some other. So I do feel like it's going to bring in some balancing energy in a different spot instead of things being so kind of hard edged as they are in Aquarius. So, though, I mean, there may be some Aquarius issues that get a little more harsh without Jupiter's presence.
I mean, it's really interesting to think about that, because Jupiter did escape for that period of time and then had to go back in there. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see how the next few months play out with Jupiter in that sign of Pisces. I'm looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Well, I think it's time to talk about our
Ooh, the
our-
different rising signs, huh?
yeah, I think it's time to talk about where this is going to impact each of you personally.
Right.
Where so you can learn where Capricorn is in your chart, and then also bear in mind too that if you have planets of your own in Capricorn that may be being activated by either the new moon or the Venus Pluto stuff. So just, those, some of you may be much more sensitive to what's happening than others. So just keep that in mind. But at any rate, we are all receiving lessons regarding Capricorn, and some of us, the lessons may be ever more personal than
Right.
some.
And I also want to throw in here, if you haven't yet listened to the video that Jennie and I made about the Venus retrograde, please do find that, because that Venus retrograde is until the end of this month, January 29th, I think. Venus is retrograde until then, and it's really important to understand that piece as well.
Yeah.
So if we're going to start with Aries rising, if you know your rising sign, pay attention to the rising sign. If you don't, you can pay attention to the sun, or even some people work with it with the moon. Personally, I think most of us now, especially most of you that are slogging through this whole video, probably know your rising sign. So if you've got Aries rising, this is going to fall in your 10th house. So let's think about that very simply. Integrity around your vocation, how you show up in the world, your reputation. Say more, Jennie.
Well, just as we're considering each of these areas of life, you're kind of thinking about a place where you need to be willing to go it alone for a little bit. Like just go in and even if it's 10 minutes before your busy holiday day or whatever it is, just take that time to be alone. Think about the energy of the hermit in that area of your life. And then think about, this is a serious area that you're dealing with. And then think about how you want to see your maturity, like how do you want to mature in this area of your life? That's what you're being quiet about and thinking about. Yeah. So in Aries, it's going to be your vocation.
Right. What's the mature path?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you in an integrity with it? Are you doing something you want to do or not? And it's up to you to take responsibility and make a change if you need to. So that's kind of what we're thinking about as they're going through all of the houses.
Right. Right. And again, this is where Capricorn is in your chart. It's always a serious place for you. It's always a place for you to pay attention to integrity. But right now you are given an opportunity with this new moon to really examine it and plant a seed for an even deeper level of integrity and really paying attention. Because Capricorn can go cold and get out of integrity. Make no mistake of it. It's not like because Capricorn is there, you're always in integrity. It's not. It's a place that you always have to revisit. And this new moon is a time to really revisit your level of integrity there.
Yeah. And if you're not, it tends to show up as sort of like pessimism and just really being kind of dismal. So just so you know what the other end is.
and cold and cold. A negatively expressed Capricorn is not somebody you want to be around.
It's cranky.
It's cranky and
like a miserable old man,
cranky and bossy as hell,
So that gives you kind of a benchmark for integrity, mastery, crankiness, old manness.
Right. Think about that wherever it falls in your chart. Yeah. And the other thing I want to say for each of these, we want to pay attention to the idea. I love this idea of wherever Capricorn is, you're old when you're young and you're young when you're old. As you get older, as you do the work, this area of your life lightens up and brings a lot more stability rather than cranky hardness. as you develop over time. Time is so important wherever Capricorn is. Over the course of time, you develop that maturity, and then you have mastery, and you can just kind of hold that. It can end up being one of the most wonderful areas of your life once you learn how to use it.
Yeah.
Which does take time. If you're listening to this and you're 16 years old, this is probably a hard area of your life.
Yeah.
If you're 70 years old, hopefully you've been in integrity there and you're in good shape.
Yeah.
Anyway, Taurus, if you've got Taurus rising, this is going to fall in your 9th house. So you've got to really think about the issues of integrity around your worldview, how you understand people of other cultures, how you understand, I don't know, politics, religion. Do you need more education? Do you need to go deep into really studying other cultures in order to not be cranky toward people that aren't like you?
That's right. I think about the other thing about the 9th house is just this is your area where you develop a personal philosophy and your own set of ethics. And so this is a time to just look and see, as Laurie's saying, to be in integrity with, are you embracing a wide array of sources, new sources? Those are things that are going to help you continue to have a mature philosophy and set of ethics.
Right. Huh. Okay. Yeah. And if if you're a student or somehow involved in that 9th house can be so much about travel or religion or politics, or all of those worldview things. Where is your level of integrity there? Huh. Should you really be traveling? I guess I'm thinking about that. Okay, so Gemini, it falls in your 8th house. Where do we need integrity if we have Gemini rising?
In your 8th house is where you have to have a good knowledge of yourself, where you end, where others begin. So this refers to boundaries, being in integrity with your boundaries. And also, I just think with Gemini, it's really helpful to, with the 8th house emphasis, really helpful to use rituals to help maintain those boundaries. I have a good friend who has this Capricorn in the 8th house and works as a teacher. So you better believe that setting boundaries is a really, really important way. And taking that deep breath when a child is freaking out, and then being able to be a mature adult for those kids in school. So it's
that's a really good example. I really like that. That's a good example because, a teacher having that Capricorn in the 8th house for a teacher, that's a wonderful placement, actually. That's a really good placement. And it makes sense with the Gemini rising, that engagement with early education. But to be able to seriously take on, other people's values, that 8th house issues.
Baggage. Yep.
Wow. Yeah, because all your students, they all come to school with their own set of baggage.
For sure.
And to be able to handle that in a mature way would take a lot of focus on developing really serious boundaries. That's a great example.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we go to Cancer rising. If you have Cancer rising, I have a good friend with this, I think. Anyway, if you have Cancer rising, this falls in the 7th house. So you're going to really be looking at your integrity with your intimate partnerships and how you're going to manage it if one of your partners blows you off I'm getting personal here.
Yeah. Well, with the thing with the Cancer rising, that means that you're pretty serious about relationships, or I should say because I have this. That relationships are very serious, but it's also just really being in integrity with your own autonomy and making sure not giving away too much of yourself, yet giving of yourself enough. And so there's a balance with that. And as you mature, hopefully you're doing your relationships a little better than when you're younger.
Yeah. Yeah,
myself.
it's interesting because wherever Capricorn is, it takes so much time to get really comfortable there.
Mhm.
Yeah, these are areas where wherever Capricorn is in your chart, that as a young person, it's not easy. And
Mhm.
as an older person, the older you get, the more stable this area, the more, yeah, it's a serious area of life.
Yeah.
Huh.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, somebody with Cancer rising, with Capricorn in that seventh house, relationship's going to be serious. This is not going to be a person that's going to be playing the field or being out of integrity. If they are, and that's the thing with Capricorn, when someone's out of integrity
Mhm.
because they're a mess in
Yes.
that area. They're a mess in that area. Okay. So then if you have Leo rising, this is going to be falling in your sixth house.
Mhm.
So your issues of integrity, I would say really you've got to think about your healthcare routines, how you support yourself. It's going to be really important that you make sure that you have healthy routines, that your healthcare, your self-care is um, it's a personal choice
Mhm. Yes.
to really develop integrity and balance in how you care for yourself.
Yeah. I feel like anyone with Leo rising and having that serious sixth house, you would just benefit so much from meditation practice because that is a pursuit of having some time alone, of just having, even if it's a 5-minute practice daily, it is just going to be a huge grounding force for you. Because with Leo rising, it's, that's a fire sign. That's your rising sign. So it's fairly exuberant and so on. And so having that Capricorn in the sixth house to use as a way to ground yourself, very important.
Right. So this would be a really good full moon to, this is one of the things I was thinking about with this full moon. Generally speaking, the whole idea of New Year's resolutions always seems a little foolish. And yet this is a time to start something new. And it's very much supported astrologically to start something new. So this would be a good time to start a new meditation practice, or it doesn't have to be a meditation practice. That's obviously a good choice, but you could start a practice of taking a walk every day, or any number of things, a writing practice, depending on how the rest of your chart is really played out. But finding something to start as a daily routine would be really supported if you've got that Leo rising. And anything that you already do habitually is a perfect place to add on something new.
Yeah. And I think the keynote is the solitude piece, is something that you
Right.
do.
Right. On your own.
Yeah, for yourself. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, what
Okay.
about Virgo rising there, Lori?
Virgo rising, this will put the new moon in your fifth house, which is really about creativity. And the old time astrologers talked about the fifth house as children, love affairs, creativity. I think of it very much as it's where and how we give love, which is kind of funny to have Capricorn there. Like, how you give love is so important and serious, and you have to do it alone. I mean, that's an interesting way to think about that. But like with everything, where Capricorn is, as you get older, this area develops a lot of stability. And I think of it, for myself, because I've got that fifth house. Over time, I see how much easier it's gotten, understanding how I give of myself and finding true integrity in that area.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's a important spot.
Yeah, I also think with the Capricorn in the fifth house, I mean, the fifth house is an area where you really need to experiment with risk, take risks. And with Capricorn there, when you're younger, you're really not going to want to take risks because Capricorn is not a risk-taking sign. But as you get older, I think you start realizing that when you are able to risk in a funny way, it actually ends up contributing to your stability because you're more solid and you're able to put yourself out there, and you may actually increase your relationships, especially with your children or with that child energy. You're going to enhance those by doing that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And if you don't take risks, you can't make mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, you never learn anything, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And the other thing that I'm thinking of as we're talking about this, and I'm going to just throw this in, but if you just go counterclockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4 signs from the house, 4 houses, 1, 2, 3, 4 houses from the house that it falls in your chart, that's where Uranus is. So that's where something is waking you up. I just wanted to throw that in there because I'm thinking about that. Yeah. That Uranus is giving you that kind of spark of awakening.
Yeah, with the trine.
That trine. Yeah, that trine we talked about here. I'm not sure if I've made that clear, but if you just back up 4 houses, that's where the Uranus is sitting in trine to that new moon. Mm-hmm. So for you, with it happening in your 7th house, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's from the 11th.
Right. So that's the connection between the primary relationship and the community.
Right. Anyway, I'm complicating things by going there, but
email us if you have a question about that.
Yep. Text us, let us know. Okay, so if you have Libra rising, this is falling in your 4th house. How is your integrity regarding your home and family? And here we are right after the holidays. Do you have anyone you need to apologize to? Yeah, really making sure that those relationships are solid. What's the mature path? I want to bring that statement back in. What's the mature path in this area?
It's accepting responsibility for your old patterns that are you're still carrying them around and still employing them in your family at this point in your life. So it's taking responsibility for that and reckoning with your ability to establish your own inner security. Stop looking for it outside of you. It's up to you to create that within, and then basically share that with your family in a positive way, whether that's your children or anywhere, whatever your family is constituted of.
Right. Yeah, you're really developing with Capricorn there in that 4th house. It is so much your job to hold a space of mature wisdom within the family. Mm-hmm. Okay, Jennie, here we are. And now we're going to talk about if you have Scorpio rising, this new moon is going to be happening in your 3rd house. So in the 3rd house, what are we looking at? We're looking at all those issues about integrity and hard work and going it alone and seriousness. So this brings it into the 3rd house, which is communication. Yeah. Bottom line, it's interesting too, because when we were looking at the chart, talking about that Pluto right at the midpoint between Venus and Mercury, there being such an importance around what you say and how you say it. So in this regard, with that happening in the 3rd house, it just accentuates that further.
Yeah. And we've been talking a lot about the mature path, of how you do that. And to do that with your communication skills, I think you must incorporate listening, so you're learning how to speak and making sure your integrity with how you speak and how you communicate with people. Part of that maturing is to be able to listen, incorporate other people's points of views. So, yeah. And of course, as with all of these, how we've talked about it, that is kind of your job anyway with Capricorn in that house. And this just gives you an opportunity to really look at how well you are doing in that area as far as integrity and finding your own path, finding the truest, most authentic path of integrity in that area. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Anything
right.
else? Anything else about that?
No, I think we're ready for Sagittarius.
Okay, if you've got
Yeah.
Sagittarius rising, this is happening in your second house, which suggests that in general, and now in general, this area of second house, which is money, resources, self-worth, it's a serious area. And it's very important right now to get serious about any shifts or changes or, yeah, new paths that you're developing in that area.
Yes, this is about knowing what your values are and making sure that you're in integrity with them, and taking responsibility for those values. And I was also thinking about just having to take responsibility for loving yourself. I mean, that's what, if we're talking about self-worth,
Right.
that's something that we're all learning to do and is not an easy path. So there's that. And one of the ways I always think of that you can do this is building your energy reserves, like through connecting with nature. That's kind of what, so I'm thinking quiet walks in nature to help balance this energy out.
Huh. Quiet walks to balance your own self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's your job. It's your job. It's
Mhm.
Capricorn there, this new moon happening there, that integrity, your own responsibility toward your self-valuing.
Mhm.
And given that this is all happening right after after this holiday season, and that second house also being a lot about money and resources, you're probably just about ready to get your credit card statements from, and if you overspent, it's going to suddenly be in your face. And, Venus doing its retrograde in the same house right now. It's really important to consider how you work with your resources. And I like, when you think about it, the way you were talking about, yeah, how do you value yourself?
Mhm.
Yeah, how do you, I almost think it's, yes, take a walk in the woods and then go spend some money on yourself.
Mm.
Not in a frivolous way, but in a way that seriously supports your path forward.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that.
If you have a idea of something ambitious and responsible to yourself for your own self-valuing, if there's something you need to support that, think about it, plan for it. Don't run out and spend the money now. Venus is still retrograde, but planning for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important thing also.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, so now if you have Capricorn rising, this is really getting personal.
Sure is.
Because this happens right in your first house, which is the most personal house, the most personal area. It's about your personality, how you express yourself, what you show to others.
Mm-hmm.
And with Capricorn there, you're wearing a serious mask, so to speak. Not, it's hard using that word mask for the first house because people sometimes tend to think it's something we're hiding behind.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to think about it that way. You want to think about it as a way of presenting yourself most authentically.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think of your whole statement about being young when you're old and older when you're young, kind of thing, with the Capricorn rising. And I feel like a lot of people I know with Capricorn rising, it takes them a long time to fully mature. It's interesting, like this just personal experience. So it takes a long time to witness your own mature growth through life, which is really what you're doing with Capricorn in the first house. And so having all these planets there, and certainly through 2020, being a lot of probably shedding of layers of identity that you might see in this area. So
right, and really learning and developing that understanding of the importance of how you present yourself.
Yeah,
not an easy task.
no.
Capricorn rising is definitely a challenging one.
Mm-hmm.
And people with Capricorn rising, I remember this feels like one of the earliest things I remember really sinking into my head was about that Capricorn rising. People with Capricorn rising, youth and childhood is really difficult because there's such a serious way that they have to show up in the world. And as they get older, they really kind of can settle in. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Kind of, yeah, shed some of those layers that are
Yeah.
obscuring the true nature,
Right. They're
So,
much more
mhm.
comfortable showing up in the world as an old person than a young person, because that maturity they've grown into the maturity of it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So what about Aquarius? That makes it everything fall in the 12th house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that, you're looking for, okay, that whole idea of what's the mature path in exploring your own unconscious, understanding yourself on a much, much deeper level.
hmm Yeah, and maybe it'll be helpful to talk a little bit more about the 12th house, like in terms of like it has all those significations like hidden enemies or self-undoing, or just simply that which is not seen. So that means that this process is tucked away out of sight from the public view, in a lot of ways. So that maturation process. We always talk about the realities of suffering, like to live means having to deal with some suffering. That's just part of life. But letting that suffering teach you about compassion for other people, that's really the purpose. And so there's a lot of some of those components, like having some discipline about how you deal with that, or yeah.
So if you were to think about planting a seed with the new moon in the 12th house, what would you think of?
I think about, kind of ironically, it's like planting the seed to surrender, to having to spend some solo time, in the name of cultivating more integrity.
Right.
What about you?
So, well, my thoughts go to things like maybe you need a new therapist.
Yeah.
There's some serious work. You can really spend this time, this 6 months of this particular cycle, you can really spend some of that time doing some real internal work. And, people have therapists sometimes that they'll have for years and years and years on end, and they're ultimately not doing any work. This could be a really good time to start a renewed, deep exploration of your unconscious, whether that be with a therapist or, some sort of study that is exploring your own inner nature. Maybe it's time to make an appointment with an astrologer and really get a view of yourself from that deeper underground layer of yourself. A good friend of mine gave me I really understood the 12th house much better after talking with my friend Mary Jo. And she talked about the 12th house kind of allowing information to come in from an unknown source. So with that thought, I would think this would be a really good, rich time to really pay attention to intuition, pay attention to like serious topics that there's all
Interesting.
like different ideas come to me. The new work going on in the world right now around psychedelic therapies for people with serious depression. And if anyone is listening to this and has some interest in that particular subject, there is a website called Mind Bloom that I would recommend you look at.
Nice.
So,
awesome, Laurie. Yeah. And finally, we have Pisces, huh?
Yeah, Pisces rising puts this in the 11th house. Now, what's the 11th house mean to you, Jennie?
The 11th house, in the simplest word, is community. But in a lot of ways, it's how you let your community hold you. It's how you participate in your community, how you exist within it, and thereby how you let other people offer you support. Right. That's receiving love. Is a good way to think of it.
So how much integrity do you have in the community that supports you? That would be a thing to look at. How willing are you to be supported? Is that a difficult place for you? I remember, you know, early on in studying astrology, people would talk about the 11th house as your hopes and dreams for the future. And it's really, you know, I think of it now as the community of like-minded people that support you to those hopes and dreams. And with Capricorn in that house, it can be really difficult to accept support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I back to our kind of thought about how do you mature, what's the mature path in this? And I think taking advantage of the time to reflect on who your community is, where your role is, and then asking yourself about being in integrity with that community. And I think in a word, the mature path is participation. You know, is putting your shoulder to the wheel as well, and accepting other people's energy and supporting you.
Yes, participation is not all about giving. It's also about receiving. And yeah, that's a very, very important thing to think about with that whole polarity of the 5th and the 11th houses, the giving love in the 5th and receiving in the 11th. All right.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much brings us to the conclusion of our conversation today.
Yep.
And if I happen to have Aquarius rising and I realize I really need to plant a seed to seriously understand myself, and I want a consultation with you, Jennie, where do I find it?
You can find me at hiddenpathastrology.com.
Okay.
That would be great. Just check out my website, or Laurie at astrolore.org, right?
.org. Yep. That's right. Okay. And thank you everyone for being here, and we look forward to 2022.
That's right. Thank you. Thanks, Laurie.
Bye.